Okay, let's see how much time we'll have this time. Okay, my apologies. I was informed that when it freezes like that, it is a Wi-Fi buffering problem. Not sure how to fix that, but I just pray that we can get through the remaining sections. Okay, we were talking about Bereshit, just giving a brief overview. Again, Yaakov, whose name was changed to Yisrael, he has 12 sons and a daughter. Okay, now he has these sons. They are extensions of himself, so they are referred to as being a tribe. Tribe, you look the word up, it simply means an extension. That's where we get the 12 tribes of Israel. So, Bereshit closes. There's a lot of other details in that too, but just giving a brief overview. As the story closes, the nation of Israel, or the family, I should say, of Israel, they go down into Mitzrayim or Egypt, 70 souls. Okay. Now, the next book is Shemot. Okay. Now, the book is originally referred to as Uale Shemut. Okay, but they just broke it down and just called it Shemut, which means names. So, in the book of Shemut, it picks up where Bereshit left off, and you have Israel being down in Egypt. Okay, now eventually Israel would be forced into slavery to the Egyptians. Now, in that book, we learn about how Yahweh delivers Israel by the hand of Moshe, who would also become the lawgiver. And this was the beginning of them being established as a nation. So after giving the initial statutes and judgments, Moshe is given very specific instructions on building a tabernacle in the wilderness. Now, there's a passage we want to look at in Exodus chapter 25, verse 22, which reads, "And there I will meet." That phrase, "I will meet," when you get an opportunity, look up the word that's being translated, "I will meet." And again, that's coming from Exodus chapter 25, verse 22. Okay? And what you're going to find that's interesting is that it's the exact same word, Ya'ad, which you find in Amos 3:3 and Psalms 48:4. Okay? Let me read the passage. "And there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the sons of Israel." So that is one of the reasons why the tabernacle is going to be established. In addition, we find in the book of Shemot or Exodus that the tabernacle is actually completed within a year. But upon its completion, we find out Moshe is unable to enter. Now our story picks up in Vayikra or Leviticus. So, that being said, he starts off this particular scroll, Vayikra, and he called. Now we want to look up this word, which comes from number 7121 in the Strong's. Okay. The word is kara, and it means to call out to. It says that is properly addressed by name, but used in a wide variety of applications. So it is a Hebrew term, a verb that means to call or to summon. Now keep that in mind, to call or to summon. Now remember, one of the definitions for the word ya'ad was also to summon, as if summoning to a trial. Okay. Its context and surrounding grammatical setting determine the various shades of meaning given to the word, similar to most Hebrew or Hebrew terms. Depending on the context, it may have another meaning, but they refer to as different tenses. All right. So the word kara is also connected to number 7122, which is basically the same word, and it has as a definition to encounter. All right, think about that. So it refers to this particular writing, and he called. And one of the definitions is to encounter, to call out to. Let me write that up there for you. Call out to, and also to encounter. Now, looking at those definitions for the word kara, what does that tell us about the book of Leviticus? Is it a book that's indicating that he's calling out to us? And again, this has several connotations. Okay. Is it a book in instructing us on the encounter that we're about to have? Think about it. Okay. As we get through some of the different chapters, you're going to see exactly. Now, the word Leviticus, as we discussed before, is built on this word right here, which is Levi. Okay, Levi being the tribe where the priest came from. Okay, so the fact that it's dealing with the tribe of Levi, think about the word in the Hebrew or Ibri, Lewi. The word means to join or to be attached. Think about that. So you have a term kara, which means to call out to encounter, but then even when it's translated into the Greek and given another name, Leviticus, the name Leviticus, which stems from Levi, which in Hebrew, Lewi, which means to be attached, still showing a connection. Think about that. So in the book of Leviticus, as Bible students, here's the question. Are we going to learn what connects us now to the Most High? Are we going to learn what we're being called out to? Are we going to learn how to encounter, which we're going to see? All right. This is early on in our discussion, brothers and sisters, but we'll get there. What I want to do now, I want to put up an interesting overview of how the book has been set up. The book has basically been divided into 7 different parts. Okay. Okay. Now the first part, which we're going to look at, is ceremonial. Okay. Ceremonial, basically, you're talking about different acts prescribed by ritual. So in Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 7, verse 38, what we're going to get into is what's called the sacrificial system. Okay, the sacrificial system. Oh, sorry, you can't really see that too good over there. Let's see if I turn this around a little bit. Try to offset this so you can see the writing a little better. It's taking it out of focus. My apologies, but I'm looking. Sorry about that. It'll get back into focus when we try to, but I just can't write the scriptures up there. So I'm not going to write it up there. I'll tell you what it is, because due to the lighting, you're not going to be able to see it. I have to find out a way to fix that. Okay, so the first part, ceremonial, again, that's Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 7, verse 38, dealing with the sacrificial system. And basically what that is, these are the ways of acceptable approach to Yahweh. All right, consider that. Now, this next section deals with the priesthood. Okay, now a priest basically is an officer or an official of the Most High who presides over Israel. Now, from Leviticus chapter 8 and verse 1 through chapter 10 and verse 20, this is actually historical. It's not really filled with instruction so much, but it tells the story of how the priests were consecrated And what it means to be consecrated is to be set apart, similar to what we refer to as sanctified. Okay? So that's what we learn in the second part of it. Now in the third part, the focus is purity. Okay? Now in this particular section, think about purity. The definition of purity is the quality of not being tainted or polluted. All right? Now in Leviticus chapter 11 and verse 1 through Leviticus chapter 15 verse 33, it tells different things that Israel need to learn in order to maintain their consecrated state. Now, what we're going to learn about is different things that actually cause Israel to become unclean. And one point that I want to make about that, and we'll touch on it more further when we get to that, being in the state of uncleanness is not the sin. Okay? We're being informed about these different states of impurity so that we know when we cannot come into contact with the Most High or anything that's deemed holy by the Most High. Like I said, we'll touch more on that once we get to that. Now, the fourth part is to some degree you can look at as the focal point of this particular book. But there's one festival that stands out, and that's the Day of Atonement. And you find this within Leviticus chapter 16, verse 1 through chapter 17 and verse 16. Now, the question we want to ask, why is there special emphasis placed on this particular observance? Okay, and when we get to that point, we'll discuss that a little more detail. But now what we're going to see as we finish up with the final three sections of Leviticus and the outline or the overview, we're going to basically see each of these sections repeated in the reverse order. So the next section deals with purity again. Okay? And this is Leviticus chapter 18, verse 1 through chapter 20 and verse 27. Now, these particular instructions deal with the morality of the people. Okay? These are things that Israel can't practice if they want to be in a state of purity with the Most High. And it touches on, again, the morality. And you can even look at it as the consecration of Israel again. So you have one state of purity letting us know what makes us impure and when we're not allowed to come into contact with the Most High or anything considered holy. And then this is more or less focusing on how we live in our lives with an emphasis on our relationships, which we'll get to that when we get there. The next thing goes right back to the priesthood. Okay. Now with the priesthood, this deals with certain standards now that is required for a person to be a priest or an officer of the Most High. And this is from Leviticus chapter 21, verse 1 through chapter 22, verse 33. Okay. And the last one, back to the ceremony. Okay. All right. So this particular part, now it ends with Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1, all the way to chapter 27, verse 34. And now these show the acceptable walk with the Most High. Okay. So as you can see, a brief overview of Leviticus. You have ceremonial section, you have a section dealing with the priesthood, you have a section dealing with the purity, or I should also put impurity. You have the section dealing with the Day of Atonement. Then you go back to a section dealing with purity. You have a section dealing with the priesthood, and back to ceremonial. Now, just looking at that, what can we surmise that the basis of Leviticus is? Holiness. When we think about holiness and what it means to be holy, as was mentioned, the word holy It's synonymous with being sanctified. It's synonymous with being consecrated. And when we define it, the term holiness comes from a word in Hebrew, kadash. And what does that mean? It means to be set apart. Think about this. The Most High, he called Avram, okay? And it says, matter of fact, let's read that. It's coming from Bereshit or Genesis, chapter 12. And let's see what it says. Because we're learning different things. And we're going to see from an example, we're going to take a look back at a piece of history now and accept what it says at face value. In Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1, it says, Now Yahweh had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house. So it's three different things now. He had to be separated from his country, the land that he lived in. He had to be separated from his family or his relatives, and he had to leave his father's house. In other words, he says, unto a land that I will show thee. In other words, what is the Most High doing? Literally speaking, he is separating Avram. He is setting him apart. I'm going to go to another passage. This is coming from chapter 13. And there's something in particular. Now, in this particular, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. Avram, when he left his father's house, his nephew Lot went with him. Okay? So they come upon this one particular land, and the men that were with Avram were having a dispute with the men that were with Lot. So there was plenty of land. Avram told Lot, look, there's plenty of land. You and your people choose what you want, and we'll take, the other piece of it. Okay? So Lot looked over the land, him and his people, they decided to go down to Sodom and Gomorrah and everything. Okay? So when you get to the verse 14 in Genesis chapter 13, it says, And Yahweh said unto Avram, after that Lot was separated from him. And I just really wanted to emphasize that part, because it's showing, even though Lot came down with Avram, it's teaching us that now the Creator, he's going to deal with Avram, but he still had to be separated from his kindred. Okay, it says, and Yahweh said unto Avram, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art, northward and southward and eastward and westward. And basically he's about to promise him a particular piece of land. All right, for him and his son and his son's sons, etc. In other words, something that was promised to Israel as a people. All right. So when you think about holiness, first thing the Most High is going to set up, he's going to set up a system designed for us to maintain a separation. Okay, and we'll talk more about the sacrificial system once we get to it. Going through the motion of consecrating this group of men for a very particular task. And one of the problems, even among Israel today, is the understanding of the priesthood. Now, there's a passage, I believe it's Malachi. Let me go to that. Chapter 2. In verse 7, and listen to what it says about the priest. And I'm interjecting this because a lot of times when people think about the priesthood, they just associate priests with offering sacrifices, as if that's all the priest was supposed to do. A priest or the officer of the Most High was much more than just somebody who offered sacrifices. As for example, it says, for the priest's lips should keep knowledge. Now the word keep, when you look that up, it means to guard, to protect. Think about that. As an officer of the Most High, as a Kohen or Kohanim, you're supposed to guard the knowledge of the Most High. It says, and they, talking about the people, should seek the law, the Torah, the teachings, the instructions at his mouth. Why? For he is the messenger of Yahweh of hosts. Now, what's interesting about the word messenger, there's a Hebrew term, you can find it, number 4397. The word is malach. Now, the word malach in other places in the Tanakh or the Old Testament, it has been translated as an angel. So you can look at it this way. For he is the angel of Yahweh of hosts. So the priest is a messenger. So people, when you limit the work of the priest to just offer sacrifices, you're missing the most important point. You're missing the fact that it was the priesthood that was given that right. Matter of fact, now the priest and the prophet played a similar role, because there's a passage where you can find in the book of, what did we just finish? I believe it's Haggai. And it mentions that Haggai is a messenger, and it utilizes the exact same term, malach, same as that has been translated as an angelic being. So not only was a priest considered to be a messenger, but a prophet was also considered to be a messenger. Now, what you find a common link when you look at the history of Israel, you'll see for them, Moshe. Not only was he a prophet, Moshe was also a priest. Aharon. Not only was he a prophet, he was also a priest. When you go a little further, look at Shemuel or Samuel. He wasn't just a priest, he was also a prophet. When you get into Yechezkel or Ezekiel, he was a priest and a prophet. When you get into Ezra, same thing. He was a priest and a prophet. And there's several other men that you find in the history of Israel who were not just priests, but they were also prophets. Okay? It was a twofold thing, if you will. You see? So the priesthood not only responsible for the sacrifices, but also for the message or teaching Israel Torah. Okay, which is why there should be a priesthood established today, and we'll touch more on that once we get to that section. Of course, the purity. Now, when you get into this part, this is just giving different instructions on what Israel, what happens to Israel when they get in contact with certain things, what would make them unclean, if you will. Okay, and we're going to go through that. One of the things that comes to mind initially, you have in Leviticus chapter 11, it gives a listing of different types of food that are determined to be clean or unclean. Now, what's interesting about the clean and unclean meats, we're not introduced to that concept here in the book of Leviticus. You're actually introduced to that concept in the book of Genesis or Bereshit. Because when Noah, I was about to say Moshe, when Noah was instructed to put the animals on the ark, what we find out is that it mentioned that there's supposed to be a certain amount of clean animals and a certain amount of unclean animals. So the question is, what's the significance of the clean and unclean? Well, what the Most High actually did, and we'll get into it, he actually created some animals with the intent to be consumed by humanity, but some animals he created not to be consumed by humanity. Now, you look at our world today, people are eating anything. Matter of fact, I heard somebody say, well, if it has meat, then you can eat it. Well, that's not true. That's not according to the Torah, right? But again, that was a way that Israel was given to maintain purity. Then you get to Yom HaKippurim, or the Day of Atonement, which are very specific instructions given on that day, and the list goes on. All right, but all of these, when you get into Leviticus or Vayikra, they're given because Israel is supposed to be in a state of holiness. Let me reference one more point. This is coming from something that was said to Avram. It said, this is coming from Bereshit chapter 17 and verse 1. It says, and when Avram was 90 years old and 9, Yahweh appeared unto Avram and said unto him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be thou perfect. What is it that we must do to be considered perfect for the most? And what that word perfect means, it means to be complete. What does that mean? Okay? And when we go through the different sections, we're going to learn quite a few things. Okay? So I'm going to stop right here. Once again, my apology for technical difficulty, but as I was informed, this is a Wi-Fi buffering issue. Not sure how to solve that. If anybody have any suggestions, by all means, I'm open for some suggestions and different steps that I can take to hopefully prevent the freezing or the skipping of the video and things like that. Because the intent and purpose is to get the word of the Most High, to get the truth of the word of the Most High to the people. And Most High put on my heart and mind earlier today when we were talking, One of the greatest obstacles against the truth of the word, and it's interesting, and people may take some issue with me saying this, and I shouldn't say one, but I say two particular things that really stand up against the truth of the Most High. And those two things are Judaism and Christianity. It's the Judeo-Christian mindset. Now, hearing that, you may take some issue, like I said, but here's the reason why. Each one presents the scriptures, okay? So they have some truth, but they don't have the fullness of it. It's tainted and it's intermixed with falsehood, which is why it makes it dangerous, okay? They don't present the entire truth, and that's what the problem is, you know? And I was, again, thinking about that as we were, talking. And when you get into studying the word, we have to come and approach the word from a whole new mindset. We have to approach the word freeing ourselves of what we've already been taught. The reason why is because it is going to affect how we receive now the word. Okay? All of us who come into the Bible and this knowledge and this information, we're presented the Bible of one of two ways: from the mindset of a Jew or from the mindset of a Christian. And I'm talking religiously. Okay? If they're both tainted, that means that we're being presented the words. Here's an example, something that we learned years ago. You take a glass of water, simple example. Now that water, which is good for the body, all you need to do is put a drop of poison in that water. Some of you listening may remember when Rabbi gave us that analogy. It doesn't take a lot, just take a drop. But you keep drinking that water with that drop of poison regularly, what's going to happen? You're going to die. That's why you have terms like the unadulterated word of the Most High. You see, one of the things that the Messiah promised us, he said, if you continue in his word. And as we've discussed, when we study the word from King James Version, or we study the word based on this rabbi's interpretation, we're not getting the word according to the way the Most High intended it to be received, but it's being tainted because somebody's giving it to us based on how they see it, how they interpret it. And what we want to go back to is the original. We want to go back to the drawing board, so to speak. We want to get back to what thus saith Yahweh. And what you're going to find that many things that the Jews have been teaching in actuality is not true. You're going to find that many things that Christians have been teaching in actuality is not true. When you go back and you take heed to what the Torah teach. I mean, even the Messiah during his day had to come against those who were practitioners of Judaism. You see? And Christianity is just a modernized version of all of your pagan rituals. That's all it is. When you get into what Christians practice, show me one passage in the Holy Bible that teaches that we're supposed to observe Sunday. Show me one passage that substantiates observing a practice such as Easter with all of the rituals surrounding it. Show me one passage of scripture that substantiates Christmas. The Bible doesn't even mention a date when the Messiah was born. Where does this come from? But these are all practices of Christianity. Again, when you do a research on where these practices come from, you find that they are deeply rooted in paganism, heathenism. Again, two forces that stand in opposition to most people's reaching the truth of what the Bible teaches is Judaism and Christianity. And we have to get out of that mindset and start accepting the word for what it says at face value, which means we got to get back to that original language. Not saying we got to become Hebrew scholars, but we at least got to look behind what the English says so we can testify as to whether what it is translated as is in fact the truth. And most I will, and as we continue through the book of Leviticus, he'll open our hearts, he'll open our minds, so that we can behold wondrous truths from his Torah. Until next time, hallelujah, Beshem, Yahushua HaMashiach. Gracious and merciful Father, Holy One of Israel, our, through your Son, our Savior, our Redeemer, and our soon coming King. Uplift our heart, our mind. Lead us and guide us by your Spirit through your word, that we may come to understand your way, even as you have laid out how the heavens are higher than the earth, so are your ways higher than our ways, and your thoughts higher than our thoughts. Therefore, we pray that you strengthen us by your Spirit, that we be not conformed to this world, but that we all be transformed by the renewing of our minds, that we may show what is that good, what is that holy, what is that acceptable way of Yahweh. In the name of your Son, we pray. Hallelujah. Amen.
Now, at the house, we used to do YouTube, right? It didn't skip, it didn't jump, it didn't freeze, it didn't nothing.
Well, it wasn't YouTube Live.
Oh, well, how did
What
you
house?
do
You're talking
it?
about when we did that Macbeth, when I used to
Right.
upload
How
it,
did
right?
you do it?
I had to use the video tape. But then I had to upload it. But see, when I do it that way, I got to cut it down into all the different sections. So, you know what I mean? So if I can do one, I can do like an hour teaching. I got to break it up into like 6 different sections. And that's the thing. But with the YouTube Live, it just goes right on.
Won't you Google it? Ask.
How to fix the Wi-Fi buffer?
Yeah, ask. Ask your phone.
Well, I Googled that before, but
And they didn't give you no suggestions. And say you have a problem with